Yo, what is up, y'all? It's Cone back here again today with another video, and as I sit here at 1:40 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, I have a burning question for your favorite NBA team. In fact, I have a burning question for every single NBA team that I'm going to go through in this video. We're going to start off at the Atlanta Hawks in alphabetical order and go all the way to whoever the last one is, and I'm going to give you one burning question for each NBA team for the 2023 NBA season. Leave a like and subscribe if you enjoy, hit the notification bell too so you don't miss any videos, and go ahead and comment down below the answer to the question I give to your favorite team. Let's go ahead and get right into it. Starting off with the Atlanta Hawks, my burning question is this backcourt gonna work? I've been on record on this channel saying multiple times that I'm not super sold on the idea of DeJounte Murray and Trae Young. I just don't know how either of them are going to play off ball. DeJounte isn't a great outside shooter for Trae, and Trae has kind of been in control of the ball at basically all times for the Hawks, basically his whole career. So I'm kind of curious to see how it works. If it works out well, the Hawks have a really high ceiling, but if it doesn't, then this could be looked on as a massive mistake in a couple years because they gave up 3 first-round picks. If this team doesn't make a bounce back, and just a year ago they made the conference finals, if they can't replicate that success, then this was a big failure. I'm not a huge fan of it. I think there is potential for it to work, but I'm really curious to see how it goes. For the Boston Celtics, I'm curious if Robert Williams can stay healthy. Rob is a guy that I was preaching for years would become a high impact player for the Celtics, and he did this past season when he was healthy. He missed some time throughout the playoffs, and now he's going to miss the start of the season due to an injury that he tried to play through in the finals. He says he doesn't regret doing that, which I don't blame him. He got to play in the NBA Finals, but still, you have to wonder how durable is he going to be. Having Al Horford down there alongside him kind of helps him out a bit because he's another big body that can kind of take the reins and let him rest a little bit. But still, for the Celtics to be as competitive as they want to be, and that's winning a finals, they need Robert Williams to be healthy, and if he's not, this team's ceiling drops a ton. With the Brooklyn Nets, I'm curious to see if they can stomach the pressure this season. There are a lot of guys on this roster that are under really high pressure when you think about it. Kyrie Irving, free agent this upcoming season, needs to prove that he's worth a max contract, and with the Nets, the whole team, that's going to be looming over them. They have a lot of pressure to get this thing done this year because there's a good chance Kyrie walks in the offseason. Kevin Durant just saw his former team in the Golden State Warriors win a title without him, so I'm sure he's feeling a lot of pressure to show, hey, y'all can win without me, I can win without you. Then you have Ben Simmons, who has been clowned nonstop by NBA Twitter ever since that Trae Young situation. He's got a lot to prove that he can be a winning player. Steve Nash is probably on the hot seat if they don't perform. Same with Sean Marks. Everyone in this organization is under a ton of pressure. Kevin Durant could request a trade again at any time if they don't perform. This whole franchise, there's pressure bearing down on them. The saying goes that pressure makes diamonds. We'll have to see if that's the case with Brooklyn. My question for the Charlotte Hornets is, what is going on? And I made a whole rant about this, so I'm not going to go too deep into it, but basically, they don't have really a direction at the moment. I think they're going to be really bad. LaMelo's good. He's their current franchise cornerstone. They need a lot more in this rebuild. I think they should move on from like Hayward and Rozier. Plumlee is still their starting center somehow. I'm going to get worked up if I keep talking about it. If you want to see me rant about the Hornets more, go check out that video. But basically, I don't know what's going on there, and I think they're going to be really bad. For the Chicago Bulls, my question is Lonzo ever going to return? Last season, he got hurt and he was supposed to come back during the season, and then it kept getting delayed, and it's like, oh, maybe he comes back right before the playoffs. Maybe he's back in the playoffs. He never came back. And then we all thought heading into this season, there's no way he's still hurt, but he still is. And the rumor is there's a chance he could miss a few months, if not the entire season, because the injury just isn't reacting well to all the treatments they've tried. This new surgery hopefully is going to get him back on the court soon, but they need him desperately. Ayo Dosunmu and Alex Caruso are great, but Lonzo just brings a whole new energy to this team. He's a great playmaker, great defender, and he was really shooting the heck out of the ball last year. When he's on the court, they're a far better team, and without him, they can't reach their ceiling. For the Cavaliers, my question is, when will Evan Mobley break out? I think it could be as soon as this season. Evan Mobley, if you've watched this channel, which if you haven't, you should subscribe. I'd really appreciate it. But he's one of my favorite players in the league. He was my favorite player in last year's draft class. I think he's a future superstar in this league. Defensively and offensively, so much potential on both ends. And really the only reason I think it might not be this year is because Mitchell coming into the fray isn't going to have him doing much on the offensive end. I still think he's going to be an all defensive level guy and a defensive player of the year sooner than later. And for the Cavaliers to truly hit their ceiling this year or in coming years, they just need Evan Mobley to break out, which I personally think is just a matter of time. So we'll see if it's this season, but if not, it's probably next year. For the Dallas Mavericks, my question is, did they do enough? They lost Jalen Brunson to the New York Knicks. He was huge for them last season. They still have Dinwiddie, who's a really solid guard alongside Luka, and they brought in Christian Wood, who seems like he's going to come off the bench to start the season, which I'm still not in love with. They brought in JaVale McGee, who I think is a really good fit too. But the question is it enough? You, of course, have Luka, who's one of the best players in the world, probably pretty soon going to enter top 3, top 2, maybe even top 1 discussions in a couple of seasons. But for right now, he needs more help. You can't win in this league alone. And they've got a lot of great role players, but I'm worried he's still not going to have that number 2 guy. And with how good the rest of the Western Conference is, and so many teams got so much better, I think the Mavericks might have lost a step. They still have Luka, and he can basically do anything, but it's up to the rest of the guys to see how far this team can go. My question for the Denver Nuggets is, can Jokic three-peat as MVP? I'm not really worried about this team in the regular season. If you watched my season predictions video, you'll know that I picked them as my 1 seed in the West. I think this is going to be a phenomenal team. So my big question for them is, can Jokic pull off what very few players have done in history and three-peat as the most valuable player? The past couple of years, people have been talking about, oh, he's a weak MVP, whatever. He's not. He's phenomenal. And if he was able to pull off the three-peat, he would quickly catapult himself into the top like 6-7 centers in NBA history, especially doing it in a time where the league has never been this talented. There are so many great players that could win MVP. If he's able to do it a 3rd time in a row, he quickly goes down as one of the best to ever play the game. Our 9th team is the Detroit Pistons, and my question for them is this the year they take the leap? They've got Cade Cunningham, they've got Jaden Ivey, they've got Isaiah Stewart, Jalen Duren, Saddiq Bey, they brought in Bojan Bogdanovic too. They've got a bunch of young talent, and bringing in Bojan, bringing in a solid vet, kind of indicates to me that they're ready to try and take that jump. But the Eastern Conference is ridiculously deep. So many teams got so much better. I'm not quite sure if this is the year, but if Cade Cunningham takes an all-star leap, Jaden Ivey plays like a Rookie of the Year guy, Bojan has a solid season, Saddiq Bey gets a bit more efficient, which honestly is a lot of things to happen, but all these players in this young core that I'm discussing, other than Bojan, who's like 34, have a ton of potential and room to grow. So if they all kind of have it in this upcoming season, I don't see any reason why Detroit can't make a run for a play-in spot. I don't know if they will, but it'd be super fun to see them do it. Then we've got the Golden State Warriors, and for me, my question is, who's going to earn the contracts? If you don't know, Golden State is in a bit of an interesting situation right now in terms of their financial restrictions. Draymond Green has a player option this upcoming offseason, and he could decline that and become a free agent. Jordan Poole right now is eligible for an extension, and if he doesn't get that before the deadline, he'll be a free agent this upcoming offseason. Andrew Wiggins is a free agent this upcoming offseason. They're going to have to pay a lot of guys, and the play of those guys in this season is probably going to dictate who they decide to keep. Do they let Draymond go, who's been an integral part to their dynasty for the past few years? Do they let Wiggins go, who's currently an all-star in his prime, but he might just be the odd one out? Do they let Jordan Poole go, who I don't think they will because he's still super young, but how much money are they willing to give him? Who is going to earn their contract this upcoming season for the Warriors? And along the way, can they pull off the repeat? For the Houston Rockets, my question for them is Kevin Porter Jr. the answer at the point guard spot? They've got the 2 and the 3/4 lockdown, depending on where Jabari Smith ends up. I think he's a bit more of a 4, so they've got 2 positions locked down. I also like Şengün. I think he's pretty good, so that could be the center position locked down, but that point guard spot is a bit questionable. A lot of people really like Kevin Porter Jr. I think he's shown a ton of flashes, but for me, this is the season for him to truly show it. If he goes out there and you're still not sure if he can be your point guard, I think the experiment is probably kind of over, especially with him being, I believe, a free agent at the end of this season, and if not, he's going to be due for money at some point soon. So is he going to be your point guard? And especially if you're the Rockets and you end up with the 2nd overall pick and you have a chance to take Scoot Henderson, you're going to take him. So Kevin Porter Jr. has to take this chance to prove he's the point guard. Otherwise, he might be one of the odd ones out, eventually move to the bench, or just have to head somewhere else. My question for the Pacers is, when do you move on from Miles Turner and Buddy Hield? The Pacers have a ton of interesting young talent, guys like Tyrese Halliburton, Benedict Mather, and Jalen Smith, Isaiah Jackson, Chris Duarte, amongst other names. having guys like Miles Turner and Buddy Hield in the rotation are good if you're trying to win, but they're not trying to win right now. Right now, they're trying to build around these young guys, and having these two veterans takes away from some of those minutes. I'd expect those two guys to get moved for some first-round picks, maybe even to the Lakers in a Russell Westbrook trade, getting two very valuable first-round picks in their 2027 and 2029 first-round selections. But we'll see. There's a number of avenues, and I'm sure any team would be interested in those two guys, but I do expect them to get moved, and I think they could either get a fun young piece back for them or get some fun draft capital, which opens up room for all the young guys to play, which is what Indiana should do. Now we've got the Los Angeles Clippers, and I'm curious for them, can they stay healthy? On paper, this team is completely stacked, like 12, 13 guys in the rotation that are real NBA rotational guys on playoff teams. It is unbelievable the number of talented guys they have on this roster. The question is, can they stay on the court? John Wall has missed a ton of time in his career due to a number of injuries, and he hasn't really played in a year. So does he have the chance to stay healthy and be productive like he's shown he can be? Kawhi Leonard just missed a whole season with an ACL tear. How much time is he going to miss rehabbing that, taking off nights on back-to-backs, resting up? And even if he does rest up, can he stay healthy? A guy who hasn't really played a ton of games in any of his recent seasons. Paul George consistently deals with injuries. If they can stay healthy, this team is completely stacked, and I think they could win the finals, but that's a big question if they can stay healthy. For the Los Angeles Lakers, I have a billion questions, but the one I picked for this video is Anthony Davis still Anthony Davis? Which kind of sounds weird, but we saw Anthony Davis a couple years ago in the bubble take that step. He became a champion, he played like one of the best players in the world, and heading into the season, a lot of people saw him as kind of the guy that was about to rise to prominence as the #1 player in the world. He was going to take LeBron's mantle as the best player in the Lakers and just kind of start that new era as LeBron took a bit of a back seat. And he hasn't done that, both due to injuries, but also due to some inconsistencies last year. Had a really down year, a lot of that due to injuries where he couldn't really find a rhythm. But overall, Anthony Davis is a guy that if the Lakers want to be back to their championship contending ways, they have to be able to get the AD that they got a couple years ago. If they do, it could be a huge season for them. But if they don't, then what happens? Outer halfway point, we have the Memphis Grizzlies, and my question for them is, can they avoid regression? Last year, they jumped all the way up to the 2nd seed after being the 8th seed the year before. Ja Morant played like a borderline MVP candidate. Desmond Bane broke out. Jaren Jackson broke out. Everything went their way. It almost seems inevitable that this year there will be a bit of regression in terms of regular season record, especially because Jaren Jackson's going to miss some time. They lost some guys like DeAnthony Melton and Kyle Anderson this past offseason. They're going to have to integrate in some rookies. It feels inevitable that they're going to regress a bit, but the question is how much of that can they negate due to getting better as young players? Can Ja rise up to a true MVP contender? Can Desmond Bane become an all-star guy? When Jaren Jackson comes back, how's he going to look? Overall, I still think the Grizzlies are really good, but it does feel like regression is a bit inevitable. We'll have to see how they fight it. For the Miami Heat, my question is, will Bam Adebayo finally be aggressive? Bam in preseason interviews said he's going to try and shoot 18 or more shots a game this upcoming year, which would be huge for the Heat. They need Bam Adebayo to truly become that next All-NBA guy next to Jimmy Butler if they want to catch up to other teams in the East. They're weak in the front court, they need him to be aggressive, and in the few games in his career where he has shot 18 or more times, the stats are ridiculous. He is a great player when he plays aggressively. The question is, will he actually do that? In preseason, he was doing it a good bit. I hope it stays that way, and if it does, we're in for a career year from him. But if not, the Heat are really going to struggle. My big question for the Milwaukee Bucks is, what is going on with the bench? They have a great starting lineup with Jrue Holiday, Grayson Allen, Chris Middleton, Giannis, and Brook Lopez, with a guy in Bobby Portis coming off the bench who's pretty good too, as well as Pat Connaughton. That's like 7 guys who are pretty solid, but as you look deeper into the rotation, it gets pretty weak. George Hill, I'm not super sold on as a backup point guard. He's pretty old. Javon Carter has had some flashes, but we need to see it consistently before I'm a true believer. Wesley Matthews is also getting pretty old, and you have MarJon Beauchamp, who's solid. He looks pretty good heading into his rookie season, but we're not sure how he'll be able to produce. There's Jordan Nwora, who's a really inconsistent guy. Serge Ibaka is older. Like, there's a lot of potentially good names in theory, but I'm not super sold. I wouldn't be surprised if they make a move at the deadline like they typically do to shore that up. Maybe like a Jordan Clarkson is a name I've seen floated around who would fit this team perfectly and make me feel better about it. But for right now, they do feel a bit weak on that end. For the Minnesota Timberwolves, really the only question we can ask is Cat and Gobert going to work? It is such a weird combination where when the rumors came out that the Timberwolves were looking for a center to put alongside Cat in the offseason way before the Gobert trade, everyone was very confused because Cat has been a center for so long. But now we've got this duo where you have Rudy Gobert, who's this high-level defensive guy, and Cat, who is one of the best offensive bigs of all time. How are they going to work together as two 7-footers down there? I have said that I'm a believer. I think it's going to work pretty well. I predicted the Timberwolves to be really good this upcoming season, but there is a good chance it doesn't work either, that I'm wrong. I cannot wait to see it in action. I'm super excited that the Thunder play them on opening night so I can watch it super closely because it is a very weird pairing. I can't wait to see whether it crashes and burns or flies way higher than some people thought. For the New Orleans Pelicans, my question is, who is their number one guy? Zion Williamson, in my eyes, should be the number one guy. He averaged 27 points per game on 60% shooting in his sophomore season, and he's coming back and he looks like he's in the best shape of his career. I think he could go out and be a dark horse MVP candidate if the Pelicans take a jump like I think they could. But you also have Brandon Ingram, who is really good. He was phenomenal in the playoffs this past year, averaged, I believe, around 27 points per game against the one-seeded Phoenix Suns, being guarded by none other than Mikal Bridges, who was just in Defensive Player of the Year conversations. There are a lot of people who think that Brandon Ingram should be the number one guy, and I can't blame them for thinking that. I still think it's Giannis, but I'm very curious to see how those two shake out when it comes to the pecking order. For the New York Knicks, the big question that has kind of been going on the past few seasons even, is RJ Barrett the guy for the team? They took him at 3rd overall a few years ago, and he's gotten pretty good. He just got a max contract extension from the Knicks this offseason. He's looked pretty solid, has had some inefficiency issues, but overall, he looks to be a pretty solid player. The question is, can he be your guy on a championship team? I don't believe he can be. He's still super young, so he has a chance to prove me wrong, which I would love to see, but he hasn't really shown me anything so far that makes me think that he will become that guy. And if not, then who is going to be your guy? Can RJ take that leap and truly become a person you can build around as your franchise centerpiece, or do they need to try and find someone else, whether it's in free agency or the draft? Who knows, but it will be fun to find out. For my Oklahoma City Thunder, my big question is, who is the power forward going forward? That's a weird sentence. We have Shea, Giddey, Dort, Chet as kind of 4 guys. The question is, who's going to play that 4 when Chet comes back? This year, Jeremiah Robinson Earl is going to step up and play the 5 while we have a mixture of different guys at the 4, but JRA is in conversation to play that 4. When Chet comes back, he can stretch the floor. He's a solid defender. At 6'9", he's got some decent size. He can do a bit of everything. He just feels like a nice connecting piece, but there's also like Darius Bazley, who we've played in the past, although I can honestly say I'm a bit more out on him now. I wouldn't be surprised if he's gone as a free agent heading into this offseason. There's Poku, who has looked really good in preseason so far. Maybe he breaks out this year. There's Ousmane Dieng, who I think has a lot of potential as a long-term fit there. Looks to be a really solid defender. He looks a lot more polished offensively than I expected heading into his rookie season. He's super young, has a lot of talent there. There's a number of guys who could potentially take that spot, or it's someone that we draft in this upcoming draft. You know, if we're still bad, maybe Victor Wembanyama pairs alongside Chet Holmgren, any number of other guys like a Cam Whitmore even. Amin Thompson could fit in as a wing player. Who knows? But right now, that race for the 4 spot is super interesting to me. For the Orlando Magic, my big question is, who are your guards for the future? They've got Franz, they've got Paolo, they have Wendell Carter. Those are 3 guys that you have in the front court. For the foreseeable future, I think they can be your 3 front court players when they're competing for a championship. But the guard spots are questionable. You have Cole Anthony, who was a bucket getter for you last season. You have Jalen Suggs, who you just drafted 5th overall, who had a really rough offensive season but showed a ton of defensive promise. And then there's Markelle Fultz, the former 1st overall pick, who's looked like an incredible playmaker in limited minutes in these past few seasons. 3 very different type of guards. You've got a defensive guy, a scorer, and a playmaker. How do they fit alongside those 3 front court guys? I think there's going to be a battle for a lot of those minutes this upcoming season. I'm curious to see how it shakes out. And if you get to the draft, there's a good chance they could end up with another guard to pair alongside those 3 guys, adding another guy to that fray. It's really going to have to shake out this season to kind of figure some things out. I'm curious to see how it goes. For the Philadelphia 76ers, my question is, can they finally escape this 2nd round purgatory that it just feels like they're stuck in? They've had multiple series in the past few years where it feels like they should have come out on top, but they didn't, and they cannot make it to a conference finals. This year, to me, feels like their best team in a long time. You have Joel Embiid, James Harden could bounce back, Tyrese Maxey looks like he could be an all-star caliber player one day, Tobias Harris is really solid, PJ Tucker brings some defense and grit that they've lacked, D'Anthony Melton is really solid as a backup guy too. I like Montrezl Harrell as an energy big off the bench. I like what they've done. I like the way they've built out this roster, but can they get it done? At this point, I predicted them to win the Eastern Conference, but even then, to me, it kind of just feels like they're cursed at this point to never escape the second round. They shouldn't have done it against the Hawks a couple years ago. We'll see if they're able to do it this season. For the Phoenix Suns, my question is, who steps up on the team? You have Chris Paul and Devin Booker. They have been your go-to scorers for the past few years. Someone else has to step up, whether it's Cam Johnson, who's now being slotted into the starting lineup, Mikal Bridges, who's shown a ton of defensive potential and was even third in Defensive Player of the Year voting this past year. Can he become more of an offensive threat? Or is it DeAndre Ayton, who just got a bag from the Phoenix Suns after trying to go to the Pacers? That whole situation feels weird. Maybe they try and get him more involved. Regardless, someone has to step up and be another scorer on that team for them to truly make it back to the finals. For the Portland Trail Blazers, my question is this their last year of the Dame era? Dame has been phenomenal for the Blazers. He's gotten them to a conference finals, had a couple really solid playoff runs, had two of the biggest game winners in NBA history. But to me, this team just doesn't feel like they're going to really go anywhere, and it feels like their ceiling has kind of capped out with him. I like Grant, Nurkic, Simons, Hart alongside Dame in a starting lineup, but it doesn't feel good enough to truly compete in the West unless Dame is averaging like 40 out there, which it's Dame, who knows, but they don't have a great bench. I still don't love it stacking up against some of the true contenders in the West. To me, it feels like this is just kind of the end. This is their last attempt at things. I don't think it's going to go super well, and I wouldn't be surprised if Dame trade rumors, for real this time, start to pick up by the offseason. The Sacramento Kings, the only question you can ask, is this the year the drought finally ends? They have not made the playoffs since I believe I was 6 years old. I'm 22 years old. It is ridiculous. I have started school, graduated college, and gotten into this line of work in the time that they have missed the playoffs year after year after year. But they've got a solid roster. They've got De'Aaron Fox, Domantas Sabonis, two guys that could potentially be all-stars. Keegan Murray looks like a potential rookie of the year. They've got shooters in Malik Monk and Kevin Huerter. Harrison Barnes is solid. I like this team. Do they stack up against a lot of the other teams in the West? I don't know yet. We'll have to see it on the court. I'm praying for Kings fans that this is the year, regardless of if they get swept in the first round by 50 points every game. I do not care. I just want to see the Kings make the playoffs. I'm rooting for you guys. The San Antonio Spurs, my question is, do you guys think Victor Wembanyama is going to look good in a Spurs jersey? To me, it kind of feels natural. It feels like having a great big like him. You know, they had David Robinson, they had Tim Duncan. Victor Wembanyama kind of just feels like a natural fit next in that Spurs uniform. I've seen a couple photoshops from Spurs fans. It looks pretty natural. I think he'll be pretty solid for them when they get the first overall pick because they're going to be very bad. And he'll play alongside Keldon Johnson, who's really solid. Devin Vassell could have a breakout year, and some solid rookies in Jeremy Sohan, Malachi Branham. I'm excited for the Spurs, you know, having Victor Wembanyama heading into this upcoming era, but this year's going to kind of be a struggle. For the Toronto Raptors, my question is, what is Scottie Barnes' role? He talked in the preseason about seeing himself as kind of a point guard, and he does have the capability to handle the ball at times. He's a bigger guy. He can also defend and rebound, and he's not a great scorer yet. Efficiency-wise, he's still got a long way to go there, but I'm curious to see how he fits into this team because he does feel like the guy on their team that has the highest potential. He feels like he could be an all-NBA guy down the line. How do you maximize that potential? How do you maximize him exploring his game and getting better and giving him room to grow while also trying to compete? Because the Raptors were the 5 seed last year. They have 2 all-star guys in Fred VanVleet, Pascal Siakam. OG Anunoby is good. Gary Trent Jr. is good. You've got some solid guys around them. How do you try and maximize his chance to grow and develop as well as win? I'm very curious to see, and I hope Scottie Barnes has a massive second year. For the Utah Jazz, my question is, where will the vets land? You've got Mike Conley, you've got Jordan Clarkson, you have Malik Beasley, 3 guys that you could trade for probably a pretty good return, and I'm curious to see where they land to affect the league. Mike Conley is still a really solid guard. Jordan Clarkson could give any team a spark off the bench. I know I already mentioned the Bucks, but other teams like the Sixers, the Heat, any team that needs more guys that can just score, I think he would fit perfectly on. You also have Malik Beasley, who I said was a vet, but he's still decently young. I think he's 24, 25 years old. He can space the floor really well. He's a knockdown three-point shooter. Another guy that can give any team some offense. I think all three of those guys are gone during this season, and I'm excited to see what teams they end up on. And finally, we have the Washington Wizards, and my question for them is, where do the young guys fit into everything? They're probably going to have a starting lineup of Monte Morris, Bradley Beal, Will Barton, Kyle Kuzma, and Kristaps Porzingis, which is pretty solid. I think that's a team that could fight for a play-in spot, but you've got young guys too. You just drafted Johnny Davis in the lottery. You have, of course, Rui Hachimura, who I like a lot. I think he should try and find his way into the starting lineup somehow. And you have Deni Avdija, who you spent a top 10 pick on just a couple years ago. I feel like all three of those guys should get significant play time, but it feels hard to do so if they're trying to build this team that's going to try and compete around Bradley Beal. I feel like still they should be trying to rebuild. I think they should have found a way to sign and trade Bradley Beal this past offseason. I understand they want to stay loyal to him, and they've got Kristaps, they've got Kuzma, who are both solid. They're trying to do some kind of, like, you know, competing thing if they can. I don't see it working out. I think they should be prioritizing young guys, so I'm just hoping the young guys don't get buried on the bench. And that was one question for every single NBA team. Once again, let me know in the comment section below what a question is you have for your favorite team as well, and the answer to all of my questions for your favorite teams too. I appreciate y'all watching. Leave a like and subscribe if you enjoy. Also, make sure to hit that bell so you don't miss out on a video. I will see y'all later. Real one, say it back.